Hi, this is Robert with MudBusters. Today we're going to be showing you how to install a set of fender flares on your Honda Pioneer 520. We're going to start with the right front of the vehicle. First thing you're going to want to do is take this bolt right here out. Now this does have a nut behind it, so be careful not to drop that nut when you pull the bolt out. Then you're going to take your MudBusters flare and you're going to install it on top of this little ledge right here with this lip. Line up that bolt hole, and there's another hole up top that goes through this 10mm stud. You'll take the nut that's supplied with your kit and put it on that stud to hold everything in place while you go forward from here. No need to tighten it down right now, we'll get to that shortly. Then reinstall the bolt that you just removed through this flap and reattach the nut on the back side. And go ahead and tighten it back down. Right. Next, you'll see that this fender flare is already formed to fit your fender. You will simply line up and drill holes in the corresponding flare holes for rivets to pass through. And on the front up here, you'll take an L bracket. So L bracket, you have 2 bolts, 2 washers, and 2 lock nuts in the kit. It'll go through this rivet hole with one side of the bracket and through the hole in your fender flare with the other side of the bracket, and everything will get bolted together. So we'll remove this rivet, install your bracket right back here. Right through that factory hole, the washer and a lock nut, and you'll want to turn this bracket so it's going to face the direction that your MudBuster is going to lay once it's finally installed. So you'll need to lift it up just a little bit to align it with this fender lip right here. And then with that other hole, we'll line our bolt in the other side of that bracket. Getting in behind there can be a little tricky. Just take your time. And once those bolts are secured, you can go ahead and tighten this nut, whatever you choose. Then you'll need to locate a drill, a 21/64 drill bit, and drill these rivet holes and install rivets as you go. Sometimes these rivets can be kind of tricky to push in, so if you'll grab a screwdriver, push with the head of your screwdriver, they'll go right in. This last one at the bottom is kind of tricky to get to. You may have to turn the tire one way or the other to suit you. And that's it for this side. On the driver's side, the only difference that you'll find is this tab is not going to be there on the driver's side. So you'll do all the rest of the steps exactly the same, excluding that one bolt. Now we're going to start working on the rear of our Pioneer 520 installation. Starting with the right side. First thing you're going to do is there's a bolt on each side right here. We're going to take that bolt out and then we're going to replace it with the longer bolt that was supplied in your kit. Now we're going to work on the upper rear from the bottom side of the fender. And the first thing we want to do is pull this rivet right here. Then you'll take your flare and you'll see that there's a row of holes on the outside and one on the inside here and one on the inside here. This one on the inside will go in that rivet hole where we just pulled the rivet out. And this one here is going to go on that stud that we just put in from the top. Now this flap will have to go on top of this bracket, and be careful not to pinch your wires while you're putting this in. So right on top of the bracket, and line it up with that stud, and you've got a spacer that's going to go on the back side. And then onto that stud. Then we take the washer and the lock nut that we were supplied with the kit and put it right on there. And that should hold everything in place fairly well for you to finish the installation. And we'll tighten that guy up in just a minute. This rivet hole in the rear. Now with that done, that should line up the rest of the holes that you need to drill for this installation. So we start at the back, making sure it's pushed up against the body as we drill. Drill a hole and insert a rivet. And continue on all the way to the front. And we will tighten this nut. You may have to hold the tool on the back inside the bed to make sure that that bolt doesn't spin while you're tightening the nut. So you get her tightened up, and the upper on the other side is exactly backwards from this one. All right, now we're going to work on our passenger side lower rear flare. This one's a little different than the other ones that we've done so far because of how it lays, where it lays, and what it does. This one isn't just for keeping mud off the plastic. This one also protects your fuel tank. So it's pretty critical that we run that, but it makes it a little more difficult to install. Still not hard, but a little more difficult than the uppers were. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take out a rivet right down here below this hump. Next step is we're going to take our flare and we're going to place it right in here. Now, it's got a couple of step notches up here. The first one goes underneath the frame. The second one needs to go back behind the bolt that's back there. And at the bottom down here, there's a ground screw, and you'll need to be sure to be in front of that ground screw and up against the frame. So once you get up there, you've got 3 holes to drill here for rivets. You've got a hole here to drill for a rivet, a hole here to drill for a rivet. This hole will reuse the factory hole that we pulled the rivet out of just a moment ago. And the rest of them I'll show you in just a moment. Now I'll move down to the bottom and take one of the extended rivets in the kit. There's only a few that are in there that are going to be longer than the others. It's pretty important that you use one here and you use another one over here where it goes through multiple layers of plastic. So we'll place that one in and then continue on drilling the holes. Now when you get down to the bottom, there's a single hole in this lower flap. There's also a hole that corresponds in the bottom of your fuel tank bracket. As you can see, this area right down here, there's a single hole in the flare and then the hole that corresponds in the bracket for the fuel tank. You just take the only short bolt in the kit. It's 3/4 of an inch long, shorter than the others, and go through that hole in the flare and up into your gas tank bracket. You put a nut and a washer on the back side and tighten it down. Then we just tighten her up. The next step is there is a small bracket that we bent into the plastic on this piece. If you'll come around and get the top hole from over here and install your last short rivet from this side. In your very last step, you've got a small flap here that aligns with the rear flap that we just put on the top of. You want to drill through both of those holes and then insert your last long rivet. And the last step is to check your alignment. So you close your bed, make sure the sides match. If they don't match, you can bend and tweak on this plastic just enough to put it right where it needs to be.
Now we're going to look at the driver rear. We have pre-installed 2 U-nuts on the frame as laid out in your instructions on the 2 lowest holes on this member. We also went ahead and put the bar clamps on the bar that is exposed right here. 2 bar clamps here, 2 U-nuts here. So we put the flare in that will rest this notch on top of this frame member and align it with those lower 2 holes that we put the U-nuts through just a moment ago. Go ahead and start the bolts through the U-nuts. And since these are not going to move, we're going to go ahead and run them in. The next step is to place bolts, nuts, and washers through the flare and into those bar mounts that we put on the inside. This is kind of difficult to do from up top, so it'd be much easier if you were underneath the vehicle, but it is not necessary. Put the first bolt through your flare and into the bar clamp. You may have to squeeze it together just a little bit to make everything line up. Put your washer on and start your nut. We'll do the same thing with this outer hole. You shouldn't tighten those just yet. We're going to have to line this panel and drill holes for the rivets first. If you tighten those bar clamps, you can't manipulate it, and if they're loose, you can push the panel where it needs to be. There's a notch on this side. It has a cutout that goes around the notch and stays close to the frame all the way up to the top. Now that you got all the rivets in, now's the time to tighten those bar clamp screws up. Now if you close your bed and align this panel like we did on the other side, you should be finished.